Welcome back to Wetlands Woodworking. We're making two boards today. If you only want to see the bottom board, you can skip to the 15-minute mark. Starting with our first board, this board is made from Blackbutt and it's had some worms through the wood, which should make a nice feature to the board. Just running the board through the jointer to get some flat faces for reference. Also running a board of Sheoak through the jointer. This will be used for the inlays and the weave. Taking both boards now over to the thicknesser to get a flat reference edge on the other side. Running the Sheoak board through the table saw to create the inlay piece, and we'll also be cutting out some thin strips for the weaves. Putting a square edge on the Blackbutt. And now cutting the board in half to make space for the first weave to be put in. Now I like to put a bit of painter's tape down on my clamps, just makes the glue squeeze out clean up a bit easier later on. Using my professional glue spreader applicator device. And in goes the first weave of Sheoak. Glue squeezer is cleaned up simply with some water and a wet shop towel. Fast forward a few hours, and once dry it comes out of clamps and it's across the table saw to cut it in half. Putting the two boards together, you can now see a join line in the middle of those two boards. So what I will do is I'll run these back through the jointer together, and that will create a complementary angle, and that joint line will disappear. Cutting the centre inlay piece for the board. Now, I forgot to record the part where I ran the board through the bandsaw, but you'll see this process again, as there's a total of 4 weaves to be put into this board. Using clamps to make sure the board goes back together square, so all those inlays and weaves line up correctly. That weave was done and dry, so it was time to take the board back to the bandsaw and cut in the second weave. There's no particular pattern I'm following here, it's just completely random. I only give the boards a light sanding where the weave will be inserted. This is just to remove the bandsaw marks. Again, I forgot to press record, so there's a bit of a rewind for the third weave. And finally cutting in the fourth weave. With all weaves now completed, we run the board back through the thicknesser to prepare it for epoxy. We tape up the board and apply some silicone to the underside to prevent the epoxy from leaking out. This is a rather tedious process of filling in all these little cracks and wormholes, and to be honest, it looks like an absolute mess, but this will look fantastic once it's completed. Roughly 24 hours later, the epoxy has dried and it's time to remove the board. I had some difficulty in removing this board as I forgot to use a release agent, so I ended up getting quite rough. And that looks quite disgusting. But it's nothing a sander would fix. Back through the thicknesser one last time. Then it's back to the bandsaw to cut out the final shape of this serving board. And there's a little time spent at the spindle sander smoothing off those rounded edges. And now adding a small round over to the entirety of the board, creating a finger pocket recess on the underside of the board. And final sanding up to 400 grit. My favourite part of any build is applying the finish. This is a food safe finish and we're applying it to the underside of the board first. And now applying the finish to the top. A few hours later, we wipe off any excess. And I'm really happy how this board has turned out. The second board, a lot simpler. I want to capture these nice cathedrals. This board is also made of Blackbutt, but will just be a solid slab with only minor epoxy work to be done. After being cut to its rough dimensions, the board is secured to a thicknesser sled with hot glue so it can go through the thicknesser. With one side perfectly flat, we can remove it from the sled and pass it back through the thicknesser to flatten the other side. trimming the board down to its final dimensions on the table saw using my cross-cut sled. Doing some minor work to prepare the board for epoxy. With the epoxy dry, I rough sand the board to 120 grit. Marking out the area for the finger recess. And using a router to put those recesses in. It's then time to address the live edge. I use a wire wheel on my grinder, taking it very light and very slow. Adding small roundover details. And final sanding up to 400 grit. We are applying the same food safe finish to both sides of this board as well. This board is also getting a coating of a food safe timber wax. I'm also very pleased as to how this board has turned out. Thanks for watching. Please smash the like and subscribe buttons below, and don't forget to check out the other videos from Wetlands Woodworking.